The NFL's salary cap is way bigger than expected, and I wish that wasn't a story because it sounds so nerdy, but it's a really big deal. And Nick and I are going to talk through that, the NFL Combine, all the wild rumors going on, and if we've got time, which defensive players we think may just jump out of the gym. It's all coming at you on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Bear With Us. I'm your host, Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of the Bears blog, right here alongside Nick Whalen, my co-host of Football Guys, as we try to bring you the most Chicago Bears-obsessed podcast we possibly can once or twice a week. Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm excited. I mean, we have a lot of stuff brewing in Bears talk with, a certain position. But then we also have the combine here, which I love the combine because I love the NFL draft. So this is just the prelude to one of my favorite times of the year.
It really is, right? This is the Thanksgiving before Christmas, right? You don't get the whole week off, but you get that solid 5-day weekend or so. And
Yep.
you're like,
Yep.
hey, no, we're celebrating. This is the celebration before the celebration. And I want to start at the nerdiest thing possible. Not because it's nerdy, Nick, but because, at least to me, this was a big deal. I'm about to make a reference that only adults in the chat are going to understand. So hang with me, guys. But hearing that the NFL's salary cap jumped from a projected $242 million to an actual $255 million was like an adult that's been setting their budget for the better part of 5 to 6 months, and they forgot that their tax return was going to come back and give them like $3,500 extra dollars. And now they're like, whoa, okay, maybe I can afford to redo my floors. I don't know, whatever you do with your money, get that new fridge. It's always got to be spent on something inside the house, right?
Right.
All this to say, Nick, we've been talking for weeks about the Bears free agency options, but this $13 million that they really didn't, I don't think they expected it. Maybe they've been expecting it, and that's why they've been linked to guys like Danielle Hunter, et cetera, et cetera. But this gives you just enough room to where if you wanted to go get one of those top shelf guys, actually the money's kind of there now. And if you wanted to spend bigger on a position like Lloyd Cushenberry, who he's a center that PFF has projected for $14 million a year. If you want to go that route, you can. If you wanted to spend bigger on one of the receivers available, though after the franchise tag's been applied, there's not many of them available. Like, you have the flexibility to go after one of these guys. So, Nick, which one would you go after?
I would stay true to kind of what I want, and I want a safety and I want a center for sure. So to me, I think upgrades who you can get in the safety class. Like if you want to go get Xavier McKinney, the best guy who can do run and pass and is young from the Giants, now you can afford him. Also, with if it's Cushenberry or their top center, you know what's interesting
Did
thinking
Winfield get
about.
tagged? Are you off the Winfield train?
I think he'll get tagged. I think.
Okay.
I think they're not going to
Just
tag
checking.
Baker or Evans, and I think they're going to tag Winfield. But to me, like if you think about this, the Bears already had cap space. This increase in the cap hurt Chicago versus the rest of the NFL. The rest of the NFL that had they're pushing off money and dead cap issues and all this kind of stuff. This helps saves them more than Chicago, who already cleaned the books and they didn't need to get saved, if that makes sense.
So I agree with you in the sense that the top end of top end, say guys like Kansas City. So this helps Kansas City try to keep Chris Jones, to use an example. I think it helps the Bears sign that one middle tier free agent that we couldn't figure out how they were going to fit into the budget, right? It's a give and a take, if you will, where not everything about this cap increase helps the Bears, but especially assuming a Jaylon Johnson tag, Nick, the difference between $25 to $30 million in cap space versus $43 to $45 million in cap space, I think is pretty sizable. It doesn't help you that the whole rest of the league also gets access to this money, but what, 10 of the teams are in cap debt at the moment. Another 10 teams, or I think it's like closer to 5 or 6, don't have enough money to really play in free agency anyways. So this is just a 10 to 15% contract increase to every contract you'll hand out. So now Bryce Huff goes from, let's say, a projected deal of $15.5 million to a projected deal of $17 million,
Right.
well within the Bears' range. And the extra increase means that that $13 million of extra space that they have more than covers the gap of what
Yeah.
that contract becomes. And I think helps Chicago get a little more of what they want, even though that means that the Chris Jones dream is dead. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah, dude. So here's the interesting thing, and we have to stay on the free agency because we'll have a lot of time to talk that I think in future pods. Do you think Poles stays true? Because he's pretty much stayed true to I want to sign youngerish players
Hmm.
in free agency that have more time within their prime that might not be the highest end guys, but I think that they're good values. You think he's going to stay that route, or you think he'll sign a Danielle Hunter, Chris Jones, a guy that's 29, 30? I mean, even Calvin Ridley, you go wide receiver, he's
Right.
29, I think. Would you
I
think he'll go older, or you think he stays to his philosophy?
Shooting straight with you, Nick, I don't know yet. Like, normally, I would give you some kind of answer about exactly what I think because I'm a
Mhm.
pretty opinionated fella. But when it comes to Ryan Poles right now, I can't tell if we're at an inflection point. What I have seen, whether you're talking about Joe Douglas, whether you're talking about Joe Shane, whether you're talking about every recent GM hire in football, they all start if they think they need to rebuild as the starched collar. We're not gonna pay anybody any more than they're worth, and we're
Yeah,
gonna
we
keep
build
every
through the
we
draft,
build to
Robert.
the draft. We're gonna keep everything young because we're
Mhm.
building towards the future. And the moment that something tips, whether that's a lot of times it's something going wrong, like drafting Zach Wilson and it not working out,
Ugh.
or in Joe Shane's case, the Daniel Jones extension, shockingly not being the right move. Wow. Right?
Or drafting him that high, but anyways.
But that wasn't them. That was Gettleman.
I know, I'm just saying
They
it's
didn't have to stick with him. Almost like another situation. We can talk about that later. Because it became Shane's choice the moment they extended him. Anyways, the point being that if Ryan Poles sees potentially resetting at quarterback or sticking with, you know what? We can even generalize this, Nick. Whether you're sticking with Justin, not sticking with Justin, drafting a new quarterback, whatever you're doing, you are making a decision that is going to be newsworthy because it's
Mhm.
newsworthy to the league. It's going to be newsworthy to your owner. And if that means that you need 2024 to at least have some good vibes, well, then maybe you do take the better player. If that's what's going
Yeah,
through Poles' mind,
no, I
right?
get it.
Maybe,
So speaking of, like, the better players that aren't gonna be out there, and I'm gonna mess up on this name, but I'm gonna give it a try, okay? Justin Madubuike,
I think
right?
you got it.
Close, right? Baltimore D tackle that, had a great year. And I mean, they had a great defense, but I mean, he was a
Great
force
year.
in the middle. He's going to get tagged from
Tag.
what we hear, but I don't think Christian Wilkins is. So you're looking at like who could that high end guy be if it's not Chris Jones or Daniel Hunter and maybe a little younger? Maybe Christian Wilkins is out there because they had to cut some people.
Well, and then you're looking for, okay, maybe I don't want to shop on the top shelf. Maybe I want to shop on the shelf underneath that top shelf. I don't even know if that exists, man, because Grenard from Texas or from the Texans, yeah, apparently he wants that Daniil Hunter money.
I
And
know.
so you start looking at this free agency thing, and it's just another reminder, Nick, that like bargain move to bring in an impact player doesn't really exist. Like, if you're going to bring in an impact player, you're going to do it with a guy like TJ Edwards, who's a former UDFA and carries the risk of being potentially just a system fit wherever he was, rather than trying to sign Jermaine Edmonds. Edmonds and let's call it what it is, Nick. At the time, that deal was probably, what do you think? $4 million, $4.5 million a year in overpay. I mean, it was a
Yep.
known overpay at the time.
Hmm.
That's just
Hmm.
what it took to get a former first round pick at 25, 26 years old, playing linebacker in the middle of your defense. That's the market price, right?
Yep.
If you're going to get a young, potentially on the rise edge rusher, good luck getting them for an affordable contract
Right.
that makes all the fans feel
Do
happy.
you do you think Bryce Huff even fits? Because he's 6'1 and a half, I think.
I haven't really thought he fit in Chicago, even as we've talked about him, which is largely why I guess I've talked about Daniil Hunter. That would just be a matter of if Flus is comfortable rotating Walker and Huff and trying to
Right.
get the what Goku Vegeta fusion of all the pass rush you get from Huff on third down and all the run defense you get from Walker on first and
Hmm.
second down. That kind of leaves you still gasping for an edge four that's actually an edge three, right?
Right.
But separate problem to solve. And
Yeah.
moreover, man, can we be really real? That number 9 pick is a great spot to take Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, Latui Latu. If you've got a favorite edge rusher, that's a great spot for it.
Yep.
We just don't want that. You know what
I
I
know. I
mean?
well, I just they're in a that number 9 spot because I mean, we're always talking about Caleb or Drake or Fields, like, but that 9, I mean, they have another top 10 pick. That 9 spot, I think, is it could be Joe Alt. I doubt he gets there. Could be Brock Bowers. Could be the top edge that you want. All those guys are there. I mean, I mean, Jaylon Johnson, we haven't talked about that yet, but like it could be your top corner, right?
Doubt
But
it, but it could be. It could
right,
be.
right. I mean, if whatever, I mean, you could. But what I would do, I think you move up slightly to make sure you get the third best receiver there.
Well, okay, so you want to talk about moving up, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so look, we'll get to Jaylon Johnson. Let's put a pin in that because Jaylon Johnson's another major part of this
Yep.
cap market conversation. You brought up the juicy topic that I guess we have to talk about because whether it's Jeremy Fowler, whether it's Ian Rappaport, whether it's Ryan Poles saying we're gonna do right by Justin, whether it's everybody freaking out over an Instagram video and completely mischaracterizing what it is. Like, obviously, everybody is tuned up right now to talk about Justin Fields potentially getting traded. So here's my question to you, Nick. Atlanta calls you, right? They're offering you a third this year, a conditional third next year that's a fourth if Justin doesn't play enough, and a pick swap from 8 to 9. Do you take this deal partially to get the pick swap so that you're that little bit closer and might pay that little bit less to go up to, I don't know, 6, maybe swap with Tennessee at 7 to try to leak into that last wide receiver?
Um, I mean, depends on the market. To For me, I think I do it because one, depending on how free agency goes, you might not get a market for Fields to get anything that's super valuable. So getting, at worst there, the eighth pick, the swap, a third and a fourth. That's the worst case scenario. That's not bad. I mean, I was hoping
It
for
could
a
be better.
two and something
I'm
else.
hoping
I mean,
for a
if that's
1. Even still,
yeah, yeah.
much as I would say otherwise, or as much as I would talk about how I think sticking with Fields is risky for Chicago going forward, I'm still a Bears fan. I would love for them to get as much for Fields as possible, partially
Mhm.
because, to be honest with you, Nick, between the Bears, Justin Fields, and the team Justin Fields is traded to, I care about them in that exact order. That other team trading a bunch for Fields so that Fields can get paid, I don't really care how well that team does. Like, I'm stoked for Justin that he got his payday. I'm stoked for the Bears that they got that draft capital. That's the everybody wins scenario. I just
Mhm.
am wondering whether it's going to happen. You
Yeah.
know?
I mean, well, because I couldn't remember what it was, so I just looked up. Trey Lance got traded for a fourth,
Yeah, that's
which
the floor here.
right,
Like,
and well, but, I mean, obviously Justin Fields has done much better than Trey Lance,
much.
but I was just looking. I was like, I forgot what the capital was. I mean, that was we're moving him. We just got to get rid of him, and they still got a fourth. So, I mean,
Right.
I think that I mean, there's rumors of Pittsburgh and other things too. Um, I think I would do it because if you move up, y'all like Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze, they are good, like very good.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you get either of them opposite DJ Moore. And again, I don't like to I'm not going to project careers, but like you're putting that same Cincinnati like situation for whatever quarterback you go with, you know? And so to me, like I was looking at Caleb Williams and Drake May's tape from 2023. And then I started looking at it from 2022, and 2022 was they were more confident. They do the ball on time more. They had better numbers. And I'm like, yeah, they had like better receivers in 2022. Their offensive line wasn't letting guys just run through in the middle. Like, and we think about, with Justin, we've talked about this, like he has been surrounded well, especially 2 years
Oh
ago.
yeah.
And that happens in college too, y'all. Like, we need to surround whatever quarterback it is well. And that's why, I want the center. You talked about Cushionberry. That's why we need the other receiver. Like surrounding them is just going to let them flourish. And so, like to me, I think moving up is pretty essential to get that third receiver.
Well, and it's so funny, right? I'm gonna try not to get off of too much of a tangent here, but so I'm sitting here scouting safeties today so that I could record the episodes of Building the Board that are dropping here soon. And if not, you can get to the live streams. We covered corners and safeties just recently, and you got to hear some of my takes on those players. But as I'm watching USC's Kalen Bullock, Nick, I'm for as much Caleb film as I've watched, the all 22 that I get is divided into offense and defense. So I hadn't actually sat down and watched the USC defense because I didn't have a reason to. And Nick, it got ghastly. Like, I mean, some of the defensive just integrity that I'm watching, it's practically a line of only three techs on the inside, and their run lanes get bullied accordingly. But those outside corners and the safety outside of Kalen Bullock play some really bad defense. And that obviously is going to make anybody press a little bit more than you'd hope they would in the NFL. But no, let's put the excuses aside. Because here's what I keep thinking about, Nick. In Caleb Williams' game against Oregon, there's a play where if he had worked the backside at elite Aaron Rodgers speed, maybe he would have had a 15-yard dig route, but he doesn't. Instead, he buys a little bit of time. He gets out of the pocket. He launches a 55-yard missile down the sidelines that gets caught for a massive gain. In the NFL, 21 points in the first quarter is enough to ride out a victory against Arizona. Because
Yeah.
say what we will, right? The NFL it's a harder game. The defenses are by and large better. The margins are by and large tighter, and you score less points. Partially because the clock stoppage rules make it to where there are just less time. There's less time on the clock. You get
Mhm.
less drives in the game. Why does this matter? It's because we are watching two players in Drake May and Caleb Williams that have a lot of these sparkling chunk plays, and they do it in a way that is repeatable, ridiculous as they do it at the NFL level. This should probably sound a lot like Justin Fields because this is how Justin Fields has lived and died over the last 3 years. But even Fields, Nick, is a great reminder that these chunk plays put points on the board. And if you can get those same chunk plays with just a little bit more structure, whatever that looks like, you might have yourself a hell of an offense. And the hope would be to agree with everything you're saying in the most roundabout way possible. That if you've got that sweet second receiver and you've even got a third receiver on top of that, don't have to be amazing. That could be like Curtis Samuel. That could be like Tyler Boyd,
Malachi Corley.
Malachi Corley. You get Rome Odunze, you get DJ Moore, you get Malachi Corley. I bet you Tyler Scott finds something in a wide
Oh,
receiver
yeah.
4 role.
Yeah.
And you get Braxton Jones into that third year where maybe he starts to turn even further a corner. Darnell Wright shows veterancy. Like we hopefully only one of the interior guys is a major problem. And even
Sign a
then,
center.
sign a center.
Yep.
You could be looking at an offense that doesn't have to be that amazing from the quarterback position to produce solid enough points for the Eberflus defense that we spent a whole half season making fun of and a whole half season bewildered by to just ride some wins out.
Mhm.
Especially, bro, what if the Vikings don't get Cousins back?
I know.
What do they do? That team's going
I
to
know.
get bad.
And like, well, I mean, you can kind of go across the way. Like, what if Jordan Love is a mix between second half Jordan Love and first half of the season Jordan Love?
Wouldn't that just be likely? We
I
say,
mean, that
what
I think
if?
I think it is likely. And then I mean, the Lions, we played them well two different times, and they're good. Don't get me wrong, y'all.
They're
They're
good.
good, but we're doing this too. Like we're going at this rate faster than anyone else in the division, which I think certainly helps. And you were talking about this in terms of the chunk plays. That is huge in the NFL. And that's why, y'all, a lot of defenses go to the too high. We heard about this, right? The change is the too high. That's why the run game is a lot more,
Yep.
easier, lighter boxes. But that's why guys that can create with their legs Caleb and buy time. Like he's so good, y'all, with buying time, having to feel in the pocket. It's a you know how I would compare it, Robert, and I don't know how long you've been doing the NFL draft stuff, but I once did a huge study. This is going to take people years back on Cordell Patterson
Did
coming
you
out. Okay.
really?
Well, I don't know if you follow Matt Waldman or not. Matt's
Hmm.
a friend, but this was before I got any of my writing because I wrote on his blog. But I did a study. I studied him, Tavon Austin, who was really good that year, and Robert Woods because I needed like a floor guy, you know. And so I don't know what's going on with my camera. That's weird. Anyways, and so I wanted to see how elusive he was and why he made guys miss. And
Right.
so he could make people miss in such different ways because he's 6'2", 220. He could juke, he could spin, he could stiff arm because he was powerful, he could run through guys, he could do lots of different things. And so I just charted it. I charted every touch he had. Okay. Every time he made a move, kick return, punt return, reception, run, right?
Uh huh.
There was only, I believe it was 2 times that whole year that he didn't make the first guy miss if he wanted to.
Oh
Like,
man.
sometimes you just go out of bounds.
Right.
But he had this weird feel. Like there was times when he would just like widen a little bit, understand the angle and go. That's what it reminds me of with Caleb Williams.
Hmm.
He just understands angles and pursuit acceleration where he'll just stop and let a guy go by and cut inside. You're like, why would a quarterback do that? Then he gets 3 or 4 more yards. Like he has this weird understanding. I say weird. That's not accurate. A good, an amazing,
Hmm.
elite understanding of, I think, spatial awareness and movement around him, but he can keep his eyes down the field and he can, maybe move a little bit this way to buy time and then throw the football that Drake May doesn't have, that Justin Fields doesn't have, that none of the other guys have, that help with the two eye safeties, that help make chunk plays. That's what makes him really special.
You know, it's so funny because everybody talks about the eyes downfield thing. I have a metaphor I'm shocked that nobody's thought of before. If it's novel, neat, right? But it may help people understand this because, Nick, I do think we hear that all the time, right? Eyes downfield, keeping his eyes
Mhm.
downfield. And not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I think that there are some quarterbacks that see pocket management the same way you and I see driving, right? Where you get a quick look into your mirror and you see nobody's in your blind spot. So then you snap your head over your shoulder. You see nobody's in your blind spot, but you still have to manage out of the corner of your eye. There's a car in front of me. I can't drive into their bumper, right? And
Mhm.
there's a car behind me and I can't stop too fast. And is somebody trying to turn into my lane on the right hand side as you're intaking all this information on your read to change lanes on the highway? If you haven't picked up the image, you still have to track all this other stuff. And some people just figuring out where the safeties are, where the linebackers, where the corners, what is their
Yep.
leverage, how are my guys moving, that is enough. That has taken up their whole brain. Other people seem like they have the capacity, and it's hard. It's rare. It's the NFL. Nothing about this is easy, right? To quickly see, okay, there's my rusher. It looks like my lineman has about 30% of him, but is going to lose him. I've probably got about this long, and his arc is probably going to come down in the pocket first and then towards me. I need to step up. And they make that decision in a quarter second so that they can get their eyes back downfield and resume where they were.
Mhm.
They I think it's safe to say, Nick, they do take their eyes downfield, or like they take their eyes off downfield and at least give it a glance, or they'd be
Oh yeah. Yeah, they have
truly
to.
telekinetic, or
Yeah.
they'd be mind readers. It's about whether they can see that, process it, act on it, get back to downfield. Because a lot of
Mhm.
guys don't, right? The
Yeah.
moment they take their eyes to the pressure or even think about the pressure, whatever's happening downfield, they just sort of
Well,
lost track of it.
I also think there's an anxiety to it too, right? Like, oh, there's a guy here. I have to worry about this. I don't want to mess up. And then because some are
Yes.
calm with that, and some aren't.
I
And
mean,
the other thing too is that there's a part where you're in the pocket and there's pressure and you sense the pressure, and then you turn your shoulders or you contort your body so that that guy can only get hit part of your body. That Caleb does better than the other guys do too. Like, I know I keep saying like just him, but like Aaron Rodgers did that stuff. Patrick Mahomes does that stuff where like you can't get a full hit on them
Right.
and they just get like slippery. And
It's
you're like,
the
how do they
weirdo
keep doing
stuff.
this?
It's the
Yeah.
stuff that Josh Allen, similar, not the same, similar though, in the sense of like, how are you doing that? Joe Burrow
Hmm.
kind of has this same pocket escapability, and I'm trying to name you different body types to show that it's not just one body type that
Yeah.
does it, even though I think that you're right on with the Mahomes and the Rodgers piece. It's
Hmm.
like, I don't know, one thing that has got to be funky to think about, Nick, because now let's talk about what it feels like to not be generational. I was not a generational lacrosse player. And you know what? If you want to say very, very good instead of generational for Caleb Williams, I don't really care what adjective you use. But I was a really gifted passer of the lacrosse ball. I was not a very gifted what's called dodger, so the one-on-one attacker. If you know nothing about lacrosse, all you need to think about is it's kind of like hockey on a field, right? It's not
Hmm.
field hockey, it's not quite the same. But the point is that you'll set up and you'll run at your defender and you'll try to get around him as an
Yep.
attackman. Following so far? I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
see passing lanes that nobody else on my team could. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm illustrating that there was something I was good at, meaning I knew exactly what it meant to not be good at the other stuff.
Yeah.
And when my coaches would slap me on the head, Nick, and they'd say, "Can't you do any better?" My honest answer was not really. I can tense, like Nick, to explain it perfectly. I can tense up and act like I'm going to really give it 115%. But the moment I wasn't relaxed, I was worse.
Yeah.
Like my mediocre butt could dodge a little on an
Mhm.
unsuspecting defender if I was playing loose. But the moment I got in my own head about now I need to do it this way, everything got tenser. I slowed down. And I have to imagine, as a high school coach, this is where I do want a story if you have one. I imagine you've seen quarterbacks that have tried to take on more than they normally take on in the middle of
Mhm.
games and just lock up, right?
Mhm. Well, I mean, as a coach, I take the blame when things don't go well.
Of
So I'll
course.
tell you a time I did something incorrectly. How about that?
Sure.
Well, I put too much on. So, another part of the strategy of football is that, mainly it's either two high safeties, right? Or one high safety.
Right.
So I would put together and look, we progressed in our season. And in this game, I put in, hey, over here is going to be a cover two beater or cover four beater, and here's going to be a cover three or cover one beater, right? So that way you can read the side, right? And this is the new thing that we're putting in. And it didn't work in the game poorly, by the way. There a pick six happened in the game.
Oh,
But
no.
I don't put this on the quarterback at all because looking back, I'm like, I didn't put enough time in the install and to talk through. And maybe I could have even said, hey, I had a signal of which side to read it. But I could tell it was too much because also, what's the snap count? Are all my guys set up? Where's the defense? There's so much processing, and that's why the ability to process information quickly is my number one trait in a quarterback. And the thing is with and May and Daniels and McCarthy, I mean, they're all they're all good athletes,
They're
y'all. Like they
very
can
good
all
athletes.
buy time.
Many of
But
them are
they're
very
all
good processors in their
well,
own way.
but also there it's not just like take the snap, drop back process. It's avoiding, then looking downfield at processing. Like it's very impressive to be able to do all of that with because you have the safeties were there. Now I'm scrambling around. Now where's everybody? Like you have to go
Yes.
through so much stuff quickly. And it's impressive how all of them do that. I think Caleb does it better than anybody, but it's still impressive.
It is like you're saying, we make this mistake all the time. And Bears fan, I don't want you to hear this podcast ever making the mistake of saying blank person sucks at blank because this is an incredibly hard game played at an incredibly high level. This is
Mhm.
a matter of, okay, they're pretty good, but that might not be good enough compared to this person who's outrageously good at something that is really hard for a lot of people. Again, I don't want to stick with the metaphor too hard, but Nick, the first time you were 15 taking driver's ed or with your parents and you drove onto the highway, I remember that feeling.
Oh yeah.
That was terrifying. And
Nervous. Yep.
now, as a 29-year-old adult, at least in my case, driving on the highway is normal. I take my son to school every morning, and I have to take him on the highway. Obviously, duh, normal adult stuff, right? But that same way you, who's listening, who's an experienced driver, feels now about your time on the highway, like that's what you're hoping these quarterbacks feel in the pocket, that it is
Well,
that normal.
Okay, so with that, I have a point with quarterbacking. So that also goes with how many times have you driven on the highway? That's a repetition thing, and
Exactly.
we've seen this with quarterback. We saw this
Yes.
with Brock Purdy.
Get it,
When
Nick.
you have
Get it.
so many years of
Yes.
doing something,
Yes.
you're gonna get better at it. That's why I always like to having quarterbacks with 2, 3 years of starting experience because the more reps you have at it, the better that you're gonna be doing it. Whether it's the chaos and scramble all the time that Caleb does, or it's throwing it within structure that other guys do, the more reps are better.
And that's where I got to tell you, if you are team draft a quarterback, the Bears are in a great spot because
Mhm.
both of these top two quarterbacks, if you want to include JJ McCarthy, you can. Technically, Jaden Daniels has a ton of starting experience, but he has 4 years at, let's say, level 3 and now 1 year at level 12. Right? Like
Yes.
the
Yep.
the draftable difference between his tape is a little freaky to me, but
Yeah.
we can save quarterback rankings for a time later in April. There is one thing I did want to ask you about. And again, Pin is still in Jaylon Johnson. We're going to get back there. But so Ryan Poles in his presser. Last year, Justin's our guy. Last year, we're going to take a look at our options, but we need to do what's best to improve the team. This year, multiple statements akin to if we end up making a decision like that, we're going to make sure we do right by Justin.
Yeah.
Felt to me like a noticeable tone change, but everybody on Twitter is telling me that this thing was a Rorschach test. Do you think it's a Rorschach test? Or
Well, the phrase I remember last year, Robert, was we have to be blown away by a prospect. And this year it doesn't sound like they have to be blown away by a prospect because it's more of this is a very unique opportunity,
right.
which is very true.
It
If
is.
Chicago had the fifth pick, I think they're sticking with Fields and they're going to take a receiver and they'll take D end at 9 and then we go. But this is a unique opportunity to potentially, you could look at what you have from Fields in terms of college, how they had him versus how these guys are in college. But now you have 3 years of that in the NFL, and where you have it. I mean, to me, it seems like Chicago is going to go with a rookie quarterback, and they're going to trade away Justin Fields. That's the way it seems to me. That's how it feels. Again, I love Justin Fields. Behind me, if you're watching, I have a photo of him. I named my dog Fields. I love him, but he hasn't done enough. And again, I think part of that is the Bears haven't done enough to help him either, but there's more he could have done. And I don't have the way I can word this is I don't have the confidence, Robert, that if you surround him with everything, he's going to be that superstar. Like I don't have 100% confidence that hey, if you give him wide receiver 2 and
Mhm.
a great line, he's going to be Josh Allen. I still think he could be good, but I don't have
Mhm.
100% confidence in that. If I don't, I think that you have to go the other way. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And
Okay.
also, I want to lend credence to something you've been saying earlier with a one-to-one metaphor that I hadn't thought of until now, right? So we keep saying that the Bears effectively didn't give Fields a real God's honest chance to prove
Mhm.
himself. And what does that look like? Well, predominantly it looks like 2022 being the problem, right? And the best one to one we have is Trevor Lawrence. If we took 2023 Trevor Lawrence in a vacuum, we said, is this guy good enough to pass on the number one pick for? No, not really. But in 2022, they had also given Trevor Lawrence a similar group of players to play with, and he did show us more last year. He didn't
Mhm.
have to deal with like 5 injuries. You can make whatever excuse you want about what didn't work in the 2023 version of the Jacksonville Jaguars, but in 2022, not only did he make the playoffs, he won a playoff game while
Mhm.
also doing simple things like throwing for 4,000 yards and leading a team from
Yep.
first to, in the playoffs and blah, 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 blah. We don't need to get into a Trevor Lawrence podcast. It's more to say, Nick, that you take the same player in, dare I say, very similar schemes and talent levels around him, but he has 2 years to prove you something. Shocker, he's able to do it, but
Yep.
only in one of those years. If Justin Fields had 2022, but had a 2023 team around him, maybe we would see, frankly, more reason to move on because it would have been the same level of play both years, but maybe not. The fact
Yeah.
that we don't know, the fact that it came down to one make it or break it year is kind of the travesty here. But I'm
Mhm.
with you that given the way things worked out, I don't really think there's a lot of other choices. Though, at the very least, there are intriguing conversations because the fact that we don't totally know means that the rest of the league doesn't totally know. And it does help his trade value a little bit. We talked
Mhm.
earlier about an Atlanta pick swap. I will throw this at you, Nick. And this may be hardcore rumor. Okay. So this is your tinfoil hat. This is your tinfoil hat moment. Okay. But
Every podcast, man.
I'm trying to make it a thing. If you haven't figured it out, I am trying to pick a tinfoil hat moment. But so Robert Randolph, who has 22.9 thousand Twitter followers, that may not mean anything, but he performs the opening for the like NFL on Prime Thursday Night Football. So he is saying hardcore rumor that if for no other reason, Nick, I'm bringing this up because it's an intriguing talking point,
Yeah.
right? That the Giants have been asked to counter by Chicago in a Justin Fields bid because Atlanta is currently outbidding them. Again, can I say
Wow.
this enough, Nick? This could all be hearsay,
Yeah.
but it brings up an intriguing idea of what would you take from the Giants if they pick swapped 6 and 9? What
What else
else?
would I take?
What else would you need if you were trading Fields? You got to go up to 6, which I hope that I don't come back to bite these words. But if 3 quarterbacks go early, you are guaranteed
Yeah.
a receiver at
Yeah.
6, not at 9, but at 6.
I would say if it's 9-6, I additionally would need a compensatory pick next year. Or I'm sorry, a conditional pick next year where like if Fields had so many starts, it's a 2, or passing yards or however you want to do, or it would be a 3. Something like that. That's what I would need.
Does it make a difference to you that when we look at 6 and when we look at 9, the difference between those two is roughly a high third round pick?
Yeah, it's
On the
different
trade
than going
charts.
from 9 to 8, I think.
It's very different. Like
Mhm.
9 to 8 is sort of that's actually a 50-point change according to
Yep.
the Jimmy Johnson chart. But
Yep.
going all the way up to 6 is a high third. So
Mhm.
in theory, if you got the conditional
Well,
future third, you'd be right on where we had the Atlanta offer.
but also, y'all, to talk about what Ryan Poles says, he says, you go through the draft, you look at pockets of players, right? You go 1 to 6. I mean, I think 4 quarterbacks are going to go in the top 9. I'll be honest. I think 4 are.
I think
You
so.
go 4, then you go 3 receivers. That's 7. At 8, you still might not get one of the receivers. You go to 6, you're going to get one no matter what. So
Right.
to me that would be very exciting.
I
But
don't know if
also,
Mhm.
but here's the other thing I think that's the most exciting about Ryan Poles and his presser. I talked about this a bunch. I just love how he's like this. He's a hustler, man.
Yeah, he
Like
is.
when he wanted to go from 1 to 2 to 2 to down last year, I was like, that's my guy. When he's working trades to try and improve the roster, or he's, bringing in, I mean, look at the staff that we just got, y'all. The coaching staff. That's
Mhm.
him. That's Flus. That's everybody. And then when I
Yeah,
hear
and
him
we
talk,
got new Flus too. Do
right?
we need to talk about
Oh,
like
new,
the
new. but
like
also, when he talks about in his presser that he just had, I'm open to all options. It could be this, it could be that. There could be thousands of scenarios. I love it. He's not just being like, we're just going to do this. He's keeping things open because
right.
you never know what could happen, y'all. Something crazy could happen.
I mean, let's use the Giants as an example. I think that just being raw with you, Nick, I think that if the Giants did take a trade down from Chicago, this would not be a good move for what the New York Football Giants need right now, right? Like whether they are actually going to draft a young quarterback or they need to prove something. I think we could try to put our New York Giants head on and say this is probably way too close to desperation for what the Giants need right now. But that doesn't mean that move doesn't happen pretty often. Like I feel as if once or twice a year, some franchise makes a desperation move one
Mhm.
way or another. So who's to say it isn't the Giants if the Maras are putting the heat under them? I don't know. Intriguing, stupid rumor to
Yeah,
track during the
sure,
combine.
sure.
Like I'm by no means telling you it's a real thing, but it does create this one other piece that we should talk about before we go back all the way back to Jaylon Johnson is, hey, I'm just bringing it up so that we don't forget.
No, I know.
I
Jalen, we're not forgetting about you, man.
the part where Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, dare I say, were telling Justin, "Hey, bud, we're not gonna leave you in this for very long. We're gonna try to
Mhm.
take this care or get this taken care of for you." That part felt to me pretty clear. One other thing that felt pretty clear is that anybody saying that they are definitely taking Caleb Williams is not listening to Ryan Poles, who is almost obnoxiously honest. Sometimes I wish he was a little more cagey. He is being very open, or was a couple days ago, that they do not have this thing nailed down yet. And I can't help but feel like if anybody's out there telling you they know what the Bears will do, as not as in they know where they think the Bears will ultimately land, but they're telling you the Bears have already made the decision. I think they're wrong. Like
Yeah.
right now, I think they're taking that hard due diligence look at everything that they should be doing. What do you
Yeah.
think?
No, no, they should because I mean, the one thing he talked a bunch about is, they already have the film. They care about the person. The person is why they didn't get Jalen Carter. The person is why they didn't draft George Pickens. I mean, the person I think is why the Chase Claypool thing failed. To be honest with you, I think that part is so ingrained because it's the leader of your franchise. It's the leader of your locker room, and they're gonna. And when you see the things of like, oh, they just met with this prospect. Oh, they just met with this prospect. They're meeting with all of them basically at the combine, y'all. When you want to get down to the 30 visits to Hallis Hall, sure that'll matter more, but they're gonna meet with all of them. But they should meet with all. I would say all four quarterbacks, right? Daniels, McCarthy, Caleb, and May. They should meet with all of them, get to know them, right? You got the
Absolutely.
putt, you got the dart thing that they do, and then to get to know them a little bit in terms of how they competitive they are. They're going to talk a little film with them, get to know them a little bit because they're going to be with that person, what, 10 months out of the year. They have to depend on that person in pressure situations. They have to depend on that person to help other people, right? Bring them along. It's a very important decision. And if you like,
Absolutely.
if you thought of it, like you're going house hunting, Robert, right? Do you just buy the first house? You only look at one and yep, this is one that we're buying.
Well, unfortunately, when you are house hunting, especially when you're a first time home buyer, sometimes you think that that is the smart thing. Is like, I should definitely, or not. You don't think you should buy the first one. You just fall in love with the first one. But I completely get what you're saying. That smart people that have done this before will be like, no, 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 Ryan, we got to talk to the others.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
you
Yeah.
have to play this thing out.
Got to compare them, right? Got to talk to someone like Robert, right, to find a good deal, right? Like
Right?
interest rates, banks. You got to think of all this stuff. Okay, hey, inspections, like all of these things you got to look
You
for.
have to look at it all.
It's a big decision. So right now they're just gathering information, but I mean, I'm hearing whispers all over the place of like, there are a lot of teams that could have these quarterbacks in lots of different orders.
Look, and I'll be the first to tell you, Nick, this is smokescreen season. And I will throw, all right, so, I was kind of being cheeky about the conspiracy thing earlier. Now I'm going to really dive in. Okay. So
What foil hat is this?
this one is still 10. It has to be 10.
Is this a tinfoil hat inside of a tinfoil hat?
This is a bigger tinfoil hat. I've doubled the honey, I shrunk the tinfoil hat, but in reverse. Anyways, so look, obviously Greg Gabriel, etc. Plenty of people on Twitter are saying Ryan Poles is going to trade the pick, right? And we have seen obviously like Kevin Warren's comments that about how much they love Justin Fields. And we saw an ESPN article today come out, as well as a couple of Ian Rappaport reports that have come out in favor of Caleb Williams, basically saying, like, I will play and I'm excited to play wherever I want to play. Beyond that, today on TV, Ian Rappaport comes out here and says, Caleb Williams wants to play in Chicago. Caleb Williams thinks that he can be most successful in Chicago. And it basically got no play outside of Bears fans who recorded what he had said on TV on The Insiders. It's the only reason I know he said it, right?
Okay.
All of this to me, Nick, has me wondering whether Ryan Poles has been, maybe not intentionally, but allowing all this speculation about Caleb Williams to put pressure on Caleb Williams to shape up and come to Indianapolis and show that he wants the job. Because at the very least, I could see that the Bears would look at this and they would say, look, the only part of this problem that we will not put up with, you are not choosing us. We are choosing you. And if at any point you think you're choosing us, we have a problem with that. Because this is Ryan Poles.
Yeah.
If Washington, the Bears blog, my guys, are saying Washington is aggressively pursuing that number 1 overall pick, how I bet you there's a price. I don't know what it is, but I'd be shocked knowing Ryan Poles if there isn't
Well,
a price.
didn't we talk about this on the last pod? I mean, it was like, okay, what pod would you be okay if you did this or
We
that? I
did.
mean,
But just because we would doesn't mean Ryan Poles would.
no.
Except I think he would. And if I'm Caleb Williams, and we've talked about this a couple pods ago, Nick, if the rubber meets the road, I want to be where there's a average to above average offensive line, or at least the bones for one. I get 1 to 2 sweet receivers. I get a record book that is basically blank in terms of all relevant quarterback rankings. I get a defense that's ready to go. If I'm stuck with a defensive head coach either way, do I want the guy who I just worked with in college, but he already got fired because he had a number 1 overall pick and it didn't work out with him? Or do I want this other guy who just got Geno Smith to a Pro Bowl, to 2 Pro Bowls?
Yeah.
Like, Nick, am I nuts? Or can we make a very unbiased argument that it's not even really a choice? I mean, we haven't even gotten to the part where you have pick number 9. We haven't gotten to any of that, right?
Well, I mean, and again, my stance for the longest time is I'm happy if they go with Caleb because I think he's really, really good, y'all. I'm happy if they go with Drake May. I think he's really, really good, y'all. I'm happy if they go with Fields because I think he's good. I think he can get better for sure. And if we do that, we're gonna have a boatload. I picture like, and again, this might date myself. I picture like I think it was DuckTales or whatever, and they're like the guy's like swimming in the gold coins, you know what I mean? Like in a room, just like all these riches
I know
of
what you mean, the
draft
Scrooge
picks.
McDuck thing.
Yeah,
Spitting
exactly. You
coins
know what I
out
mean?
of
Like
his mouth.
there's so many like just draft picks everywhere, like Chicago has, I think, almost no bad decision here because I think everything can lead to success, and there's going to be a lot of stuff going on there. I trust Ryan Poles with this. I trust his process, and he's made me a believer that much that I'm just going to lean into that with him. Do you want to pivot now to Jaylon Johnson?
Actually, I already had the segue prepped. You gave it to me. Well, Nick, if you, I'm just gonna do it anyways. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Well, Nick, it's great that you believe in Ryan Poles' process because the only part of Poles' presser we really didn't discuss yet is that he not only said that he fully intends to get a deal done with Jaylon Johnson, but he defended his deal outright, talking about strong guarantees, strong cash flows. This is a player I know you were ready to sign and trade. So given the cap number that we saw go up, given what Ryan Poles has said, if Jaylon Johnson does get locked down to an extension, how do you feel about it?
So here's where I would feel comfortable. And again, the deal, y'all, like, any free agent, they signed a 5-year deal for this much and this much signing bonus. Like the guaranteed money is all that matters. To me, you sign Jaylon, and as long as the first maybe 2 years are guaranteed, I would be okay with because we've talked about that age 26 season as kind of the thing. He'll be 24, 25 this next year. That's still going to be in that ballpark. Maybe the next year is half guaranteed or less than that. I can live with that because that's something that would be dead cap you could cut and live with. I just don't want his number per year to be record setting. I mean, there's a new cap coming out. Like it's 25 million per year. I'm not okay with that. 23 million per year. I'm not okay with that.
Okay, so Nick, AAV comes in. It's $21.5 million. How do you feel?
If it's 2 years guaranteed, I could live with it.
2 years guaranteed at 21.5 AAV. Does it bother you that would be record setting?
Would it? That no one's made more than that?
Jair is current top of OTC's board with 21 million a year. The
Okay.
corner market
Well,
might not be what you think it is, and that's
well,
okay.
in my head though, you're adding in now this extra cap. Do you know what I mean? The extra 13 million.
I have
So
to think
everyone's
that they'd be
number goes up.
I have to think they'd be working it, especially just because almost kind of a why bother extend him if it doesn't help your cap situation. There's obvious
Mm,
reasons why. You and I
yeah.
have talked about that.
I'd feel so much better if it was 20 a year. If 20 or less, I'm like, okay, I get it. Cause I mean, dude, he had a great year. I'm not trying to say that. I just don't know how repeatable it is. And the injuries kind of worry me.
20 is pretty reasonable. 20 would put him just ahead of the Legarius Sneed tag that Legarius just signed. I mean, that's $19.8 million. So part of me thinks that your AAV, it's also worth remembering, Nick, we're talking about average annual value. We're not talking about real money if it's
Guarantees.
backloaded at the end,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So if you end up with, let's say, $38 million guaranteed on a 24 AAV, that's just a goofy deal because it's either 1.5 years guaranteed or it's 2 years guaranteed and then the cap inflates and even Jaylon doesn't think he's sticking around at that
Yep.
point.
Yep.
But I could see a deal like that coming together when Ryan Poles says, I think I can pull it off. I fully believe him because to be honest
Mhm.
with you, as hard as I think this deal is, and it is hard because you're talking about a player that gets hurt a lot and also frankly performed too well given where he had been for any of this to be reasonable. He's your corner one. You need a corner one if you're
Mhm.
going to have the stability that you pretty much kept Flus around for. I think it is good news for Bears fans if you do like that kind of continuity and you like signing your own players. I am one of those goobers, and it
Well,
works out in my favor.
and if it's 1.5 years guaranteed or two, and that's it's 21 per year, whatever, it doesn't matter the number, and he proves it, then you keep him. He doesn't prove it, then you cut him loose. You know what I mean? So like, so you have a little power of position there, which can be helpful. It also makes me feel a little better to do that deal now that they have an extra $13 million per year. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it's
right.
not going to go down next year. So, because to me, it's not just like, hey, Jalen's good, sign him. It's all about the number, y'all. And like that's when you talk about some of these quarterback contracts and how much they spend, the percentage of the cap, it gets to where it hurts your team that you have to pay this much. Like
Whoa
it
there.
sounds weird that you have we need this elite quarterback, but if they make that much of the money of your whole team, the whole team can't be good around them.
So, Nick, you've talked about this before, and this is just the most basic way to surmise this. Look, Bears fan, if you're listening and you've never heard this argument before, then I just want to apologize on behalf of the football universe for not having explained it better, right? At the end of the day, you do not need a rookie quarterback. You do not need a rookie quarterback contract either. What you need is as much value over spending as possible
Mm.
across your roster. The quarterback is just happenstantially the easiest place to get that ROI, right? Brock Purdy, if you had to put a number on it, do you think he's playing $35 million football?
Oh yeah.
What number would you pick?
I would say he's probably playing 43 to 47.
Okay, let's go $45 million football. Just split the middle of that. Well, he's
Sure.
getting paid not even a million. So you're
Yep.
talking about $44 million value over average. That is a ton of value over average. What is the problem with extending Fields to $40 million? It's that he's playing at like $20 million. Maybe he's
Mhm.
playing at like $18 million. So suddenly you're not getting any value over average. You're actually getting less, right? Or paying Patrick Mahomes $1 billion. The only reason that that works is because it's actually $500 million, correcting myself. The only reason that works is because Patrick is one of the only quarterbacks that can actually meet that value so that you're not dealing with this massive negative. And in the case of somebody like Dak Prescott, Dak's probably delivering $3 million value over average. The problem is his $40 million cap hit is about to jump to a $60 million cap hit
Yep.
with his latest extension. And now Dak's going to put the Cowboys in the hole again. All of this is to say the rookie value is less in, wow, having a rookie contract is so important. Everybody who wins Super Bowls does it off of a rookie contract. It's just a matter of gimmicking out some value over average and keeping your quarterback spending at a reasonable level
Mhm.
while your guy tries to play at that 45, $50 million level, ideally, Nick, in the third, fourth, and fifth year of his contract, so that you get 3 years where you blatantly underpay your guy, so that you can then pay him market value and
Yep.
hope he's ready to handle that. All of this, all this spending fits into the same thing Nick is talking about, because the question becomes, how can we get Jaylon Johnson on a contract where he's not going to deliver drastically less ROI
Yeah.
than we're paying him for?
Mhm.
Because the moment that we pay him $25 million and he delivers $16 million of cornerback play, well, that sucks. And that
Right.
does not help us.
Just like
Montez,
Jair last year.
Montez Sweat is probably not delivering $25 million of ROI under
Mm.
any circumstance ever. The problem is Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Nick. I would give him a solid $1 million of actual ROI on in terms of what Yannick gave us, and that is a $10 million deficit in what
Yes.
we paid him. Montez will give you $19.5 million of ROI,
Yeah.
and that's a $6.5 million deficit with 19.5 of edge value, which is not easy to find. Like,
Well but with this is the whole other side of the debate with the
it
quarterbacks,
is.
is that if you do this with Fields and you stay with him and you get all of this, I talked
It
about the
does.
funny gold of picks,
Mhm.
you get all these picks, you get all these rookies with low salaries, but their
Yes.
ROI is higher, and
Yes.
the goal is you're Brock Purdy in a team. You're
The
having all these other guys around
The
that can
only
help lift.
problem, and that's where, Nick, not to cut you off, the weird part becomes, okay, how far off is Fields from signing a veteran for not $40 million in that same circumstance?
Yep.
Like, the part that I think is brutal, but it is worth mentioning here at the end of the pod, is in a world, Nick, where you did all the trading down and you got Marvin Harrison plus Dallas Turner. I don't even know if you could do that this year, to be honest with you. You might have to push all that in the future, like get your 3 firsts in the future, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. But you get all that young player stuff. You get a bunch of second round picks. You are value over averaging like crazy. The
Mhm.
question still boils down to, would you rather pay Justin Fields $40 million or Gardner Minshew 15? Would you rather pay Justin Fields $40 million or, this is a very unserious claim. I am not really meaning this, but in the world of how far off is Justin Fields at that point from what Tyson Bagent could give you with a bazillion weapons around you? Because Tyson Bagent costs you nothing. And then at that point, you could draft an extra quarterback in the second round that probably won't work, but maybe he'll be better than Tyson Bagent, who's paid
Mhm.
nothing. And
Right.
there's just nothing holding you back from
Well,
this.
that's Jalen Hurts.
Or another silly example that isn't real, right? Would you rather, Nick, pay Justin Fields $40 million, or would you rather pay a second and a third for? So let's say you trade down, you get a bunch of extra picks, and you take a surplus second and a future surplus second. You send them to Seattle. They give you Geno Smith, who's 33 and paid a healthy amount of money. Would you rather do that, reunite the guy that already knows Waldron's offense with all these weapons around you, or stick with Justin Fields? I'm not saying you have to give me an answer unless you feel like it. It's more to say that once you do all that trading back, the part where you have to stick with Justin is not a part I think we would agree on. Not you and me and most Bears fans, because I don't think that forces you to keep Justin the moment he gets expensive, if that makes sense. There
No,
are
I
all
get
kinds of quarterback options that you can
it.
unravel.
So I have a question kind of off of this. So, um, where do you watch your film? Because you watch film, I watch film, and I assume people that listen to this, they either watch film or they might be interested. Do you have a spot that you watch film?
Like a spot?
Yeah, like do you like subscribe somewhere? Do you
Oh,
YouTube? Do you
I thought you meant like a place on Earth, and I was like, you're looking
that
at it?
room
Like
that room is where
it's
you do
this
it.
room. I do it here.
This is where
Uh,
I do it too.
so I did it on NFL Plus when NFL Plus was NFL Game Pass. At this
Hmm.
point, I have found somebody that's able to get me the film just a little bit early, which is
Hmm.
nice because as much as I don't like to admit it, film stuff is often a little bit of a rat race. And if some other account beats me to finding that play, then that person gets all the retweets and whatnot. It's all a bunch of social media garbo that, listener, if you made it an hour into the podcast, I'm sure you get it, right?
Hmm.
But it just means that the earlier I can get the film, the better. And it bothers me that guys like JT, etc., obviously get the film the night that it happens. And I have to
Yep.
wait until like
But
2 p.m. on Monday.
where do you get your college film?
My college film, actually, same guy. But also, there's
Okay.
a Patreon called Caddy's Cut Ups where you
Yep.
can get a ton of all 22. At the very least, that's a great spot to start and pretty cheap to do it.
Yeah, yeah, he's one that I use too. And then I wanted to just reference another one. So Dynasty Nerds, I wrote there a while ago, but I'm still good friends with them. Um, I've actually recommended them enough to other people, Robert, that they gave me a promo code. So I'm just gonna give it to people if they're
Yeah, they
curious.
do.
It's just my last name, Whalen. Okay, you'll get 15% off if you want to. But the reason that I recommend them is because when you watch film, it takes a lot of time. You're watching this angle, you're watching that angle, there's a timeout, you have to speed up, whatever. What they do is they cut everything out. Like they make it only the time like I was watching JJ McCarthy this weekend, okay? It'll go from like drops back, throws the pass, receiver catches it, turns, runs, cuts off. Then it'll go to JJ McCarthy like from another angle or just the next play. Because don't need to see how the receiver finished the play to judge JJ McCarthy.
No, of
You know what I
course not.
mean? So to me, it saves a lot of time. I know Matt Wallman actually uses them some too because it does save time. So that's another one, y'all. So Dynasty Nerds. But if you guys have questions on that stuff, I mean that's stuff that me and Robert we do because we watch a bunch
Hmm.
of film or how you do that. I mean, again, this podcast is for you guys. So I mean,
Yes.
it's all about the Bears. But if you have questions or you have things about processes, let us know too, because we want to help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, Nick, we're an hour into the show. We should close up here. So I'm going to give you the choice. Do we want to talk about the value that the combine gives Chicago, or do we want to talk about the defensive prospects that we want to see run, jump, and race tomorrow?
To me, I think there's so many guys I want to see. I want to talk about the value of the combine for Chicago. So, well, first let's start with me. Okay, I care less about the combine, I think, than the average person because I care more about the athletic traits that a player has and how they use them on the field, less than when they stand and they jump, when they stand and they jump up, when they run in a straight line without pads, a football, a guy in front of them, any of that stuff. Now, I understand that people like the analytics and that goes into it, but that's where things I think can get a little flawed. And I think eventually we're going to get into this. They can track players on the field and get their speeds and accelerations. I think that's going to be a little bit more helpful. I don't think we're all there yet, or it's public, but I do value at the combine. I can finally get their accurate height, their accurate weight,
Yes.
their hand size, their arm length, that stuff, because that's stuff that you can kind of see on film, but you want to see what it accurately is. Um, and I mean, I like the drills because I can see some of it. I know they're practicing for the drills, but it's nice to see them move. I don't discredit 40 time and all that stuff. I just value that less, I think, than others.
So I think it matters. It depends on the person and it depends on how much you're trying to care, right? To use an example, I think Keon Coleman's 40 is going to be an incredibly interesting number because if he comes in pretty okay, people are going to go, he's not slow. And suddenly that'll turn some people's heads. But it was kind of funny, right? So last year, one of my favorite receivers was Jaden Reed, who I thought was going to run like a 4.5 something, right? He runs a 4.49 if memory serves. I'm going entirely off the top of my head. No, you know what? I'm gonna look this up. Jaden Reed.
You know what? I liked Jaden Reed, Robert, when he was at Western Michigan as a freshman, man.
Man, I'm not surprised because he was good.
He's
So
good, man.
he clocks in at the combine with every single number under 50th percentile. And if you're not if you're into any of this stuff, you should use a site that I use all the time called Mock Draftable. It's the
I
one with
like
the
mock
spider
draftable.
charts. They're the best. But so he clocks in at a 40 time of 4.45. I thought this guy for sure was going to be a 4.5 guy. I go 4.45. Jaden Reed, are you kidding me? He does that on his first run. He decides to run again. It's not tracked anywhere. I remember this 4.57. And I go, that's what I thought we were going to get.
Mm,
And it did not matter because he'd already had the first one. But it
yep.
is a great reminder, Nick, of these guys are going to run it. They're going to try to get the best time of their life, and then they are going to call it. You don't get an average of 10, you get one.
Yep. Yep. You get your best one. Yeah. No, I agree. But the other part is what Chicago values. Okay. So we know a few things. We know Chicago values the person a ton. And this isn't just quarterbacking. This is we talked about this is Jalen Carter. This is, George Pickens. So those interviews I think matter a lot to them. And then also Chicago does care about RAS. So the stuff that I'm just like, but RAS also, so relative athletic score, y'all, that's what that means. Kent Lee Platt. So I think it's at MathBomb on Twitter. I would follow him. He produces these charts all the time and he's amazing at them. And he even has other people helping him, but it's a metric he came up with. Good guy too. Um, and on there is size, on there is weight, on there is, I think there's like an explosive area in terms of I think like verticals and like jumps, then there's speed area and acceleration. So Ryan Poles, I mean, TJ Edwards, he signed him, but most of the people, Tremaine Edmonds, even guys he signed, guys that he's drafted, have had, I think, 8 RAS score or higher. So that's something to keep a note on. So when you're looking at the prospects and you see what their RAS score is, and it's 8 or more, I take a note because whether that's going to be first round or seventh round, we're going to continue. Chicago is continually going to get those type of players.
Jaquan Brisker mock draftable. Well, he was really high on everything, which makes sense. So I'm really interested to see how all of this plays out. I think that it's funny you mentioned a bunch of defensive prospects. Dallas Turner should jump out of the gym. I mean, I think that guy is so athletic, but it's the safeties I know I'm really focused on because
What do you think Brisker's RAS was?
probably 9.2.
9.13.
Man, good for him. I wish he
That's
had
really
the
good.
anticipation to really make that work for him or the coverage skill to apply it, but that's a separate piece of
Yep.
DV play. Like,
Yeah.
I don't hate Brisker, Bears fan. I think he's a great Buck safety thumper and has legitimate stopping power. I mean, truly as a run defender, that
Mhm.
guy makes an impact. I just wish DBs weren't the guys that you were asking to make that run impact all
Yep.
the time.
Yep.
Anyways, there's so many of these guys, Nick, that I'll tell you what. If you feel like I do, and you probably don't, what the Bears do with Justin Fields and or pick number one, because I mean they could trade both. It's not out of the question.
Yeah.
That kind of has me in stasis because I don't feel like I have the full picture on how many picks the Bears have. And
Yeah.
until I know how many picks the Bears have, I don't even fully know the guys I'm paying attention to at the combine.
How about this? Let's combine this, guy. Give me one defensive guy that you're very interested in for the
Jalen
combine.
Simpson. I hope he doesn't run like garbage. I think he
Mhm.
might, but he's my guy. So if you go all the way back to, let's see, Eddie Jackson Raz, if we take a look at him, oh, I don't know if he did anything now that I think about it. Yeah, he didn't because he had his leg broke.
Yeah, he broke his leg. Yeah.
But so loving Eddie Jackson like I do, I can give you a pretty clear and concise. I don't think you would have tested super well.
No, no, he's an instincts guy.
And Jalen Simpson's an instincts guy. So he's
Yeah.
somebody that I would love to see pop a little bit. You've got Dadrion Tyler Demerson. I want to watch his tape because I don't know anything about him. But the idea of a Big 12 Texas Tech safety has me intrigued.
Mhm.
What kind of player is he?
So to me, I think he's like a poor version maybe of like an Antoine Winfield, like at best, like undersized, maybe a good at most things, maybe great at nothing. That's where the poor is.
Would you consider him a true free?
Uh, Jordan Whitehead ish.
Okay. Okay. But I mean, you mentioned Anton Winfield. Anton Winfield's a free safety.
Well, yeah, I guess maybe that's a little high, but I because he's undersized. I think he's 5'10".
Oh man. Well, that's
So
fine.
let me
You're
here. Let me give you my guy though,
yeah.
Bears fans.
Yeah.
The guy that I don't know. I'm just like I don't know why I feel locked in that he's going to be a Bear. I don't know why. Darius Robinson, the
Oh,
D
gotcha.
lineman from Missouri, he could play three tech, could play big end, but he just wins anywhere that he plays. And though that's the kind of size I think that they like at an end. If you could put him opposite of Sweat, he's long, he's athletic, he's good against the run, he's a good pass rusher. That's almost ideal. He's not the highest ceiling. He's not going to be Will Anderson, but I think he's going to be good, kind of like a Montez Sweat.
He's Gervon Dexter, the edge, but for real.
Mhm.
Like he's just a huge dude that overpowers you. I
Yep.
don't know how the Bears get that pick that they would need for him. Another option, if the Bears were to trade down, that hey, I'm just gonna throw at you. Imagine Andrew Billings lined up next to Byron Murphy as your three technique.
Oh
Or you
man.
could do like a Jerzon Newton if you wanted to, like a Johnny Newton. So was that an oh man good or an oh man bad?
No, Byron Murphy's amazing.
I
You
think
kidding
Byron
me?
Murphy's pretty
Dude, he's
rad.
good. But my concern with going so high with another D tackle is that you're kind of wasting Dexter and Pickens a bit, but whatever.
Just to be so real, you definitely are, right? The question is whether if the Bears, so here's I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to say ahead of time. Okay? First of all, I think that I would love it if the Bears draft a wide receiver. I've just gone down this road a lot. I'm sure you have too, where we were so ready for them to take George Pickens. They did not. We got Valus Jones. So part of me is like, all right, I need to just set my coping mechanisms up now for if they stick with a defensive player so that I know what I'm going to say. And if they take a Johnny Newton or a Byron Murphy, I will say, don't let good be the enemy of great. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
mind
true.
the opportunity to say, hey, if Dexter ends up playing a little bit of elephant end because we're psychos and also Zach Pickens ends up being a rotational defensive lineman, this is a good problem to have.
Yeah. No,
And
that's fair.
if that's what they want to do with it, cool. They probably won't. Like I would imagine that they'll
Mhm.
sort edge before they would sort the defensive tackle position at that point,
Yeah.
but stranger things have happened. So,
Have you
we'll see.
watched Jonah Ellis yet?
Not Ellis. Is he
So
good?
so he's Luther Ellis. Remember him? It's his son.
Oh, no
Remember
kidding.
Luther Ellis for the Lions?
That was a
So
long time ago.
he's like a high effort guy, a little undersized pass rusher. I mean, you could think of Huff, with the Jets, kind of a guy like him. He's an easy guy to root for though. He plays at Utah. Like I like effort guys because that's the coach in me. Like I like those guys more. But he would be a guy that if you paired, just like you kind of said with Walker, that it could make sense, but I don't know that he could be out there every day, every
Sure
down.
could. It's funny because you also listed a bunch of corners here. You listed like Cooper DeJean, Quinion Mitchell, Terrion Arnold,
Quinyon
Caleb
Mitchell's
Carson.
so fun, man.
They're all great corners. None of them are coming to Chicago.
No,
Like they're all
no,
getting drafted well
no,
before any of that.
no.
Which is, if you wanted to talk DB for Chicago, keep an eye out for guys like Max Melton. Keep an eye out for guys like what Carlton Day. No, it's not Carlton Davis. It's gotta bring the senior bowl
Kalen
out here
Carson.
again. No, well, Kalen, I think is gonna be a top two guy, like top two rounder. Um, I
Okay.
I don't know if it's not consensus. I can tell you that. But
Well,
he's
you want to go through safety? I mean, we're kind of going through them. I mean, safety is something we need.
safety is something we need, and I'll tell you what, I cannot get a read on what the NFL values safety. Let me give you the
Yeah.
full-fledged reasoning of what I'm going for. There was a time when Leonard Fournette got taken in the top 5, and that would just never happen today. Like there's
Mhm.
a point where the NFL decides they changed their mind on certain positions and they just aren't drafting any of them anymore. And I believe that it doesn't happen because of that position. It happens because of all the other ones. This is corners getting pushed up the board, and DT getting pushed up the board, and DE getting pushed up the board, and guard getting pushed up the board, and OT getting pushed up the board. And well, you got to have your corners. You got to have your wide receivers. You got to have. And
Yep.
suddenly, safety, tight end, running back, linebacker are all just a little lower than
In,
they should be.
interior O line.
Interior O line, especially center. If
Yep.
you're center only, middle finger. If you're a center that can play a
Yep.
little bit of guard, we're drafting you actually.
Mhm.
And so with safety, Nick, I cannot tell you with a straight face that I know where Kalen Bullock is going to get drafted. He should be like the third safety off the board. Where's that? I don't
know.
know. I
I
mean,
know. I don't even know. I mean, the top one. I mean, Tyler Nubin is who a lot of people have at one. I don't. Is he going to go in the top 50 picks?
maybe top 50,
I don't know.
doubt top 40. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I don't know. I
Because
know some people have him like late round one, and I'm like,
he's so jack of all tradesy that it hurts. Like
yep,
Tyler Nubin to me is not the guy I look at as impact player, especially when safety is such a common min-max position. I mean, let's be real. Jaquan Brisker doesn't work as a corner, right? A player
right.
that's that skewed towards the run game, you'd say thanks, but that's not going to work.
Mm,
But at safety, it doesn't matter if every running back under the sun can seemingly take him down the sidelines for a massive gain.
right.
There's just not that many teams that are going to try it. You know
Well,
what I'm saying?
what? But and the other thing that you talked about this is like, do you want to spend that high of a pick because so many people get starting safeties deep in the draft, just like guards, you
Yes.
know,
And
and it's
and like
and
think about it, Nick. I mean, so much of it is because at corner, you have to be an alien, right? Modern corners need to be physical, but also fast, but also tall, but also long. And kind of like MLB pitchers, there's just only so many humans that can do that. And
yep,
when you finally get the ones that can, they get hurt all the time
yep,
because being all those things at once takes a heavy toll on your body. At
just like pitchers.
safety, man, Sione Vaki is probably a better athlete than Jalen Simpson, but Jalen Simpson understands spatial relationships, processes route concepts, moves well within that space, understands quarterback cues, and it makes Jalen Simpson almost 4 times as fast on the football field as a
Mhm.
guy like Sione Vaki that has to see the play, think about the play, react to the play, and then finally he can drive out the football with all that athleticism.
Do you think that Poles is an ageist or no?
Well, if he was, he wouldn't have drafted Valus.
Yeah, well, that's one though, but
Right. But
I don't
also
know. Just
I
wondering.
I can't say I know, but I bet he's not. I mean, call it
Well,
a feeling.
so like, because I think Tyler Nubin is 23
He's
off the top of my head.
22 when I looked it up, but I didn't find his birthday. So he might be
Or like one,
23 come
yeah.
draft day
Well,
or
and
come
then
week 1.
Kalen Bullock is 20 right now. He turns 21 end of April.
20, he's 21, and then the weirdest one that I found out about today because I evaluated the other guy everybody keeps throwing at the Bears. What is it, Javon Bullard? Like
Hmm.
I evaluated
From
him
Georgia.
off of his tape, and it's super inconsistent. If anything,
Yep.
it's extremely frustrating.
Yep.
Only to then find out he's been playing safety only this year, and I'm like, well, throw my eval out because
Yeah.
every inconsistency I just mentioned is absolutely a lack of polish, which is what happens when you
Yep.
get moved to safety this year. Like,
Mhm.
wow, why did I
What,
think
what,
this
what
would
was
go
he playing
well?
before?
He was playing slot corner,
Ah, okay. Yep.
which I love. To me, I want safeties that are former quarterbacks, cornerbacks.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it's just my opinion, but the safeties that are former linebackers, L. The
Yeah.
safeties that are former DBs, dub. Like
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking. The Eddie Jackson type, the Kalen Bullock type. Jalen Simpson was a corner at
Mhm.
Auburn, and
I even saw one report. They said Kalen Bullock could go back to corner if they wanted him to.
I mean, he could if they wanted him to. He
Yeah.
shouldn't. He's such a good free safety. But
Yep.
it's so funny because then I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. Kalen Bullock could easily get drafted over Tyler Nubin. That's my hot take, right? Because Tyler Nubin, Nick, what's the professional way to say the word that I will describe to you, but I will never say it out loud? one of my parts of my brand is that I'm never going to say this word. I think it's tacky. I think sitting in my chair on the internet, I can't accuse a football player of um not liking contact, of not putting his shoulder down and taking on blockers with force, seeming as if every time he's about to hit somebody, he suddenly leans backwards. I don't feel like I can use the S word that everybody's thinking of
I
because
gotcha.
I
Well,
think it's cheesy when
you're
a
with Kalen, you're saying?
with Tyler.
Ah,
With Kalen, he just misses. He's
yeah.
the guy from
Yeah.
Mighty Ducks that can't stop when he's attacking somebody. But you know
That's
what?
actually
He's
accurate, yeah.
20, 21. You hope you can fix that. With somebody like Tyler Newman, when you're a jack of all trades, but you're not hitting the run lane like Cam Kitchens does, who hits it like who hits it like it's the last thing he's gonna do, right?
Mhm.
In a good way. Or like Jaden Hicks, who I think is basically a linebacker that they stuck at safety. I don't know if he's fast enough to play the position, especially outside of the box safety role at the NFL level, but he hits the run game like he's a force player in the run
Yes.
game. Or Bo Brady, who is a bat out of hell out of Maryland, doing the same thing. And then you got Tyler Newman, and the moment you throw a tight end at him, we're blocked. That gets old,
Yeah.
especially when you get guys like Jaquan Brisker. Man, I haven't seen David Montgomery get a yard on Brisker when Brisker stands him up. Like,
Mhm.
I can't actually explain this. And if you can, I would love to hear it because Jaquan Brisker really won me over this last year, specifically in when a running back hits him, normally a safety is a free fall forward, except for
Yeah.
Brisker, who somehow stops the momentum totally. I'm like, how strong are you, dude?
Yeah, well, and
Like,
the thing is that he's not a big man.
not that big.
Right. Like, he's like and I say that, y'all, like, he's like 200 pounds. Like, he's not 220. He's like 200 pounds for a strong safety, which is kind of ridiculous.
He just
To
hits
me,
the
I think,
piss out of people.
to me, I think part of it is like the design of the defense. Like Geno Stone, for example, free safety, right? Free agent. People are really excited about him. He's not a good in run support. I think that you can live with that, just like we lived with Eddie Jackson, not great in run support a lot of times with this safety position. You can't live with a guy that can't cover.
No, and especially not two. If you're gonna live with one and you're gonna play
Right.
a lot of cover three because you're worried that Brisker, hey, can we just be real about this, Nick? Wow. Why did the Bears defense work so much better when they got out of cover two? It's almost like one of their safeties is not particularly great at the half field safety role, despite them wanting him to be. So
Right.
instead, they picked a defense where they could just stick him in the flat every
Right.
single major
Right.
coverage snap and they could just let Eddie do the whole thing. Well, if you bring in a safety that whether I mean honestly putting a rookie in this role would be a lot. So if you bring in a free agent that can at least cover that piece of the field and then you bring in another rookie who can hopefully take over for him in his second year, you might just have an Adrian Amos situation on your hands
You
and
you want to hear
that's
another wild scenario?
give it to me.
You bring in two safeties and you play Brisker down like a lot of teams are doing now. They're in those three safety looks.
Oh, like the big dime thing?
And then all of a sudden you're playing to everyone's strengths, which is crazy from a coach's perspective to put players in positions that they're successful all the time. But that could be a case too.
Well, you'd have to take somebody off the field. So I wonder who
I know.
you'd take off the field because I really like what Gordon's doing in the nickel. I
Mhm.
understand that PFF doesn't. I would love sometimes to talk to PFF's graders and be like, what are you not liking? I mean,
Mhm.
is it the fact that he gives up yardage and coverage? Am I missing the guys that don't? You know what I mean? Like, according to the structure of the defense, you think that's Gordon's fault, that right there. But anyways, rant aside, it's like there's pieces to this Bears defense that you could tell that they want to use. And if they did have that many safeties, I don't know how they're going to use them well. Whereas I do think, Nick, there comes a time, and God, I hope the Bears are almost here. Nick, it's been over a decade. And for the last decade, the Bears have built such thin rosters that questions like, well, what would you do with Gervon Dexter have been the norm? Because we
I
act as
know.
if you get 22 players and
I know.
everybody else doesn't matter.
That's
No,
that my answer to your question was someone can take a rest.
right?
Because like, that's just not like, because,
And
it
that
was like, "Oh,
works.
Why is Montez Sweat not in on this drive and we have to have just crap out there at the end? It's like, oh, hey, we have good quality. They're just rotating.
I
Like,
will
that's what
tell
I would
you,
do.
there are some positions where I think that works and some positions where I think that doesn't. The rotating corners thing with Terrell Smith drove me nuts.
Drove all of us nuts.
It's like, don't rotate your linemen. You can rotate your receivers instead. Don't rotate don't rotate your corners. You can
Mhm.
rotate your backer if you want to. You definitely should rotate your defensive line, but don't rotate your corner, bro. But
Well, I mean, you can't rotate your quarterback, but you can rotate running backs. You can rotate,
I
give DJ
agree.
Moore a rest every once in a while.
I agree. Nick, good show.
Yeah,
Love
man.
this podcast, man. All right,
Yeah, man.
so we are finally going to make the Sunday recorded, Monday released episode that we keep saying we're going to. We're going to do it this week. We're going to have reason to do it this week because we're going to have combine stuff. So
Mhm.
we'll do that. Nick, you got anything coming up you're excited about?
No, and actually, I have to let you guys know because I've told you about that article that I had coming
Yes.
out.
Yes.
It's not going to come.
Why?
So let me tell you why. So after finding all of the data of teams with multiple first round picks versus teams with none, right?
Uh huh.
I had conclusions,
Uh huh.
but I I can't tell you that's why teams went up and went down because a lot of times the teams with multiple first round picks were rebuilding. And a lot of times the teams with no first round picks were playoff teams. So then obviously they're going to go down in wins. So I wasn't conclusive.
I
So
gotcha.
unfortunate. I put a lot of time into something that was non conclusive.
Well, if
But
you find a way to tweak it so that it does a cool thing, there's always a spot for you, whether it's at Football Guys or over at DBB.
sure,
And
man, I appreciate it.
And at DBB, I'm hoping that we can get some sweet film stuff out. Kyle Morris, the guy who did a really good article, I don't know if you saw it, Nick, on Caleb Williams' time to throw, basically put in perspective. And if not, I can send you the link afterwards, where basically he dug into a whole bunch of advanced stats and compared all kinds of quarterbacks over the last bunch of years and found, because he originally started the offseason, basically saying, I wouldn't draft Caleb Williams if it was me. And the part he didn't mention in his article is that I kept bothering him. And I was like, well, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? Because to me, I kept seeing that number and I was like, this number is not lining up with what I'm seeing on tape. And all I ever want, Nick, is for the numbers to line up with the tape. Either
Right.
I'm wrong
Yep.
or the numbers are out of bounds for one reason or another.
Mhm.
Well, I convinced Kyle to do more of them. So he's already written something about Jaden Daniels. I'm trying to get him to write something about May, and I'll see if I can't string together a film-based accompaniment to go with each of them so that we can outline, here's what the numbers are saying, here's what that looks like on tape.
Yeah.
But all that and more coming at you over on the site. Thank you guys for listening. If you made it to this point and you haven't already, you owe it to yourself to give us a 5-star review on Apple or on Spotify. Help us get the ratings for this thing up. Tell your friends. We are trying to grow this thing to the point where we can do it and get a sponsorship, which, yeah, I mean an ad read for you, but it would mean enough money for us to justify it to our significant others. Nick's getting married. I am married. So every little bit of support really does help more than you know. DM us if you made it this far in the podcast with your favorite part of the podcast. Let us know if you've got things that you want to fix. And until next time, everybody, bear down. Thanks so much for bearing with us.